to talk a little Ohio State Buckeyes.
Yes,
and
it
who
is.
better to talk Buckeyes
Yes, it is.
than the voice of the Buckeyes himself, Paul Keels.
There he is, the voice. Paul, welcome to the Ultimate Cleveland Sports Show. We're thrilled to have you. I look at this as it's like New Year's Eve for me because tomorrow it's like Christmas Eve. Tomorrow we get to rip the paper off and we get to see the present. How does the beginning of this season in excitement and anticipation for you compare to all of your other seasons calling Ohio State action?
Well, considering the fact this is the first time that Ohio State has began the year with themselves and the opponent being a top 5 program in preseason rankings, that kind of sets it apart by itself. There have been some other, 2003, they opened defending their national championship with Washington. My first year, 98, they opened at West Virginia. But, yeah, this one's kind of a whole different level when you consider the anticipation of Ohio State and just the recognizability of the Buckeyes and Notre Dame.
And Notre Dame, obviously, their head coach, there's been a lot of talk about what he said in the offseason, and the Buckeyes are fired up. Do you think that plays a role in the game, or is that something that guys like us in the media talk about and gets blown out of proportion?
I think it's guys like us in the media blow it a little out of proportion. It got some attention, but, now that we're getting close to the start of the game and people are more focused on what's going on with the teams, who's going to play what role, things like that, I think that kind of takes a back seat. But also, I would say this, Adam, too. People around here who are familiar with Marcus Freeman when he played here, his ascension through the coaching ranks, I think they have a lot of respect for what he's done, especially in his time as a player here at Ohio State. So I think that's kind of shoved in the background a little bit, and it's more about the guys that are going to be on the field.
The voice is just incredible.
Oh, yeah.
The voice is absolutely, positively
so be clear,
incredible.
Be clear, Paul Keels is the voice of the Buckeyes.
Man.
And Paul, you holding Stokes in check down there? Are you holding him in check?
Mr. Mayor, how you doing?
I'm doing good.
I'm trying to keep you. Brad, you know better than anybody. The only person that keeps Ron Stokes in check is his wife. But I'm trying to keep him in check as much as I can.
For the years of 18 years old, so true.
I love Stokes.
Right.
Hey, Paul, let's talk about this because we really upped the ante here, right? So, as a longtime Buckeye, I've been waiting for the Notre Dame dudes. We never get to see them really, right? Basketball, football, we ever get to see it, but we get the chance to go heads up and not at the end of the year. Talk about it at the beginning of the year. The tailgates, I know the tailgates are setting up already. Like, this thing is ready to go tomorrow. How's the vibe down in Columbus?
I think they start tailgating on Monday. But you're right. The last 2 times they played, it's been in Fiesta Bowl games. And, it certainly is exciting to see that happen. But it's been 26 years since they played in the regular season. It just makes too damn much sense that these schools should play more often than they do.
Right.
They'll play next year in the 3rd week of the season. But, a lot of us grew up, as youngsters. And, I grew up in Cincinnati and went to Cincinnati Moeller High School. And we had a lot of guys that went to Notre Dame to play football.
Yeah.
Steve Niehaus, Tony Novikov, Tony Hunter, so many of those guys. So,
Jerry Fowles
Notre Dame is just, even though they've not succeeded in the win-loss total the way they did back in the 60s and 70s, they're still such a recognizable program. And, Brad, I think this is just added to everything with it being – and plus, having gone to school here, the first game of the year, they could be playing all of us putting a uniform on. There would be an excitement about it.
That's true.
Hey, Paul, what about this, though? You think as we shake down, this opens the door to Notre Dame coming in alignment with the rest of us and joining on our side of the ledger at some point?
I think it's ever gonna
Well, Brad, here's how I look at it. It's kind of like if you get a girl that you're really sweet on and you keep asking her out and she keeps turning you down, why are you going to keep asking? They said no enough times. And I think the other thing that gives Notre Dame a little bit of leverage, this new TV deal includes NBC.
Yeah.
So that probably still gives them the ability to kind of force themselves into what they've done with NBC and still somewhat exist independently. Now, when the other shoe falls with all of these other conferences, and if we do get to where there's a small number of super conferences, maybe that forces the issue. But, and the other part of it too, Brad, is when you still have some Big Ten schools that schedule Notre Dame, they're kind of having their cake and eating it too. It's kind of hard to see it.
Paul, I look at this and, you could look at realignment. You look at, teams moving around. But for me, these types of matchups give you that feeling. They give you that, it's the difference between college and the NFL. And with all the alignment and things going on, do you think that the NCAA or the Power 5 schools should do all they can to kind of keep these types of matchups going? Because to me, this is a matchup. I went back and watched on the internet, the games between Notre Dame and Ohio State, and it just gave me that feeling because of the magnitude. Do you think they should continue to do these types of things, even if the conferences expand?
I hope so, Garrett. And I think we understand that, outside of a Notre Dame or a Texas or a Washington or something like that, schools like Ohio State, they have to have the non-returnable non-conference games to where, like next week, Arkansas State comes in. That's a payday for Arkansas State. The great thing for Ohio State this year is they have 8 football games. But to kind of answer your question, Garrett, I think once we get to wherever the playoff field is going to expand, then it'll make schools feel a little more comfortable about scheduling these type of matchups so that one loss doesn't necessarily take you out of a playoff possibility.
That's probably why we don't see more of them. I remember when they had the home and home in the mid-'90s, and the excitement, the anticipation was around it because they hadn't played since, I believe, the 30s, the mid-'30s.
Correct.
So it had been so long between meetings of these superpowers. I think it ratchets up the excitement for the sport right away. Like last night, watching the Purdue-Penn State game, and even the backyard brawl, because I was kind of going back and forth between them. These are meaningful football games that teams are playing right out of the box. And to your point, Paul, about how when teams, the reason they don't want to play these is because one of them has to lose. And in the case of Ohio State Notre Dame, the loser almost falls out of the conversation immediately for national championship hopes. And that's why I wish that they would expand the playoffs and include more teams, because I think it would. I know they say, well, right now every game matters. Well, every game matters to the 10 teams that might be in the running for the 4 spots. For everyone else, none of the games matter. What do you think about an expanded playoff? What would be your perfect number, and when do you think we get there?
Jay, that's the tough part about it. And I think that's what's made schools afraid to schedule games like this, and why you've seen some of these where it's been, like remember a handful of years ago, I think it was Michigan played Alabama, and they played them in Dallas. I don't know what the perfect number is. The hard part gets to be, and I think we've all become aware of the fact they're not going to take games away. I don't know that you'll ever lose conference championship games just because of the revenue that it brings. Schools certainly don't want to lose home games, especially a school like Ohio State that's got 36 sports that they're trying to fund. But an expansion does give you, the opportunity to do this. Now, after the Notre Dame series, Ohio State's got Texas and they've got Washington well down the road. They do have a home and home with Alabama coming up. Those are the kind of things that get fans excited.
Yeah.
People aren't going to be as crazy about going to see Arkansas State and Toledo the next few weeks, except for the real diehards. A perfect number, I'm not sure, Jay. I would like to see something that if it involves maybe for the top seeds an opening round bye, I sure would love to see if it involved the possibility of some games on home fields, on campuses, so that the fan bases of teams that are involved, they don't have the burden of having to travel and deal with hotels and flights and things like that. So I'm not sure exactly, Jay, what the perfect number is.
Yeah.
Well, Ryan Day obviously has done a magnificent job as head coach of the Buckeyes, but he hasn't won a championship yet. And at Ohio State, as great as he is, there's that pressure every year, right, to win a championship. Do you think he feels any pressure at all to win?
Adam, somebody asked me that earlier today.
Yeah.
And at his introductory press conference, he made the comment, the first obligation is to beat Michigan, and the second obligation is to win every other game. So he knows from day one. He knows what the pressure is. I mean, we all remember when people were flying banners over the stadium, they wanted to fire Woody Hayes.
Oh, yeah.
So he knows that. He embraces it. The players embrace it.
Yeah.
And, maybe the most telling thing at Big Ten Media Day, a month or so ago, Ryan Day made the comment, at a lot of schools, 11-2 and a Rose Bowl win would be considered a successful season. For Ohio State, it's not, because they didn't get a chance to play for a Big Ten championship, and they didn't get a chance to play in the playoffs. So he knows that. He understands it. He has, in a very short period of time, exceeded at a high level with being in the playoffs and playing for a national championship. But, they're motivated to take that next step and achieve the things that they didn't have an opportunity to do last year.
Well, have you ever seen an assistant coach pull off recruiting like Brian Hartline has done with this wide? I mean, it's ridiculous. It feels like they're like their sixth best receiver is probably starting for 98% of the schools in America. What he's done at that position seems remarkable to me. Have you seen anything like this?
I don't think so. I mean, I think, Adam, when Kerry Combs was here, he did a great job of getting some defensive backs to come in. But, you know, what Brian has done has been amazing, especially when you consider the ammunition he has. He played at Ohio State. He had success in the NFL. He's really gotten a lot of people's attention with how he's not only recruited the talent, but then how he's worked with them when they've gotten here. Yep. You know, if you think back to last year in the Rose Bowl when Chris Olave and Garrett Wilson didn't play, that opened the door for Marvin Harrison and Emeka Ibuka, and certainly Jackson Smith-Njigba, who set all kind of records during the season and in that game. So Brian Hartline is one of those high-rising names in the coaching ranks, but it's both doing the job recruiting and doing the job with developing this talent. Maybe the hardest thing he has is just keeping these guys patient so that they get a chance to have balls thrown to them.
Great point.
Hey, Paul, what about this? Because I think Jackson Smith-Njigba is set for a standout breakout year. And C.J. Stroud, that combination probably going to be the most lethal in NCAA this year. But are they prepared? You think they're prepared and ready to go? I know how the pressure gets ratcheted up in Columbus on star players, right? So you think they're ready to hold in and be okay down the stretch here?
I think so, Brad. And, you know, they're at that point now, probably have been that way for a couple of weeks where, you know, they're tired of banging against one another. They're tired of seeing, you know, their teammates who know what they're going to do, both offensively and defensively. So, you know, they're excited to see a different person that they have to defend, a different person they have to go up against. And certainly they're probably excited to be able to get into the stadium. They've practiced, I think, about 4 times in the stadium. Rave reviews about the new turf that's down in the Horseshoe. But, you know, you guys have seen what it's like, a night game, the carnival-like environment that's there. And, you know, these Ohio State teams feed off that crowd. So I think there's just the excitement to get out of the routine of what they've done. You know, they've been a little more than a weekend class, so I'm sure the novelty of that's kind of worn off too. But, Brad, I think there's no question they're ready to see somebody else and stop going up against their teammates.
Okay. It's Buckeye time.
You know, Paul, we take a look at this, and the Heisman Trophy guys. Trevion Henderson, Smith-Njigba, C.J. Stroud. Who do you believe has the inside track? Usually, traditionally, quarterbacks are there, but the 3 great candidates right there.
I agree, Garrett. I think quarterbacks always seem to kind of have the front leg up on when it comes to stuff like that. And because C.J. Stroud did it so consistently over the course of the year last year, he was one of the finalists last year. But certainly, I mean, when you think about what Jackson Smith-Njigba did last year, you know, an Ohio State record, what was it, 95 catches, over 1,600 yards, went crazy in the Rose Bowl. You know, Jackson is a guy that certainly could make a lot of noise that way. But we all know, too, that it is a byproduct of teams that have success. So when they have success, you hope that that's what happens. But here's the thing you really hope for, Garrett. You hope it's one of these Buckeyes so that Bryce Young at Alabama doesn't become the second 2-time winner of the Heisman Trophy. Right. We want that to stay with Mr. Griffin.
Right. Hey, Paul, before we go, our producer, Mikey McNuggets, just loves it when people of note say the word McNuggets. I think last week, who gave you the shout-out, the voicemail?
Joe Thomas.
Joe Thomas did, and it made McNuggets weak. He just got in my ear and said, before we say goodbye to Paul, I just have to hear him say McNuggets. With that voice of God. It is the voice of God. So whatever you'd like to say about our producer down there in the bottom left, Mikey McNuggets, you'll make his day if you mention his name.
Well, you know, years ago, and I can't remember who the comedian was, I saw an act where somebody was talking about McNuggets, but he said they really should be called Chicken McBooty, because of what they do to your anatomy when you eat too many McNuggets. So work that one into the whole deal.
That was actually less of a diss than Ryan Day came when he gave on. He said, I should just work at McDonald's and get that NIL deal. So, Paul, thank you very much.
That's exactly right. Ryan Day told McNuggets he should have an NIL deal with McDonald's. Hey, Paul, we can't tell you how much we appreciate you having on. You give our show instant credibility. I mean, the second you open your mouth, people that are watching say, whoa, something's going on there. Something's going on there. Paul, thank you so much. Have a great call tomorrow. We'll all be listening.
Hold it down. I'll see you soon. All right.
Hey, you know what? It's going to be a good year for basketball, we think, but it's great to talk to you guys.
You see the shirt, baby.
Yes, it is.
Here, baby.
All right,
the great
guys,
Paul
good to talk to
Keels
you.
with us on the Ultimate Cleveland Sports Show.